The best way to buy something at a discount is to buy from someone desperate to sell. And the same is definitely true for Bitcoin. This metric allows us to monitor short-term retail capitulation during a bull market and load up on cheap BTC. Today, we're going to be looking at how you can buy cheap Bitcoin during a bull market and where better to start than the spend output profit ratio, or SOPR chart we have here on bitcoinmagazinepro.com. So what is the spend output profit ratio? Well, it is looking at UTXOs, or unspent transaction outputs. If you just scroll down on the chart a little bit here, you'll actually see a little bit more definition and how we're actually calculating this data. But it's taking these UTXOs, which is when Bitcoin is moved from one wallet to another and not actually spent, and we're actually denominating that Bitcoin in US dollar terms, and we're actually tracking the real-time profit or loss on those positions. So we can see here, if the SOPR is above 0, we can see that the coins are actually moved at a profit. We were seeing that the US dollar received was greater than the US dollar actually spent when they're actually assumingly purchased those coins to the point of selling them. And when the SOPR is beneath 0, indicates the opposite. It indicates people that potentially bought Bitcoin at a higher price and are now being forced to sell, probably due to emotions and fearful, irrational capitulation, especially during a bull cycle, and are now selling at a loss. If we just scroll back up here, we can see very clearly indicated these green and red bars do a very nice job of indicating when this profit taking, greed, euphoria, or capitulation, selling at a loss is taking place. And if we just zoom in here, we can obviously see as Bitcoin has rallied from $15,000 to a new all-time high above $70,000, there's obviously been quite a lot of profit made. But if you just zoom in, we can actually see very recently, over the past few weeks, there's been multiple instances of people selling at a loss, which seems a little bit crazy when you think about it. We've seen hundreds of percentage gains in a very short space of time, yet people are selling after a 10, 20% retracement at a loss. That really indicates that they probably bought the peak and are probably maybe not the most experienced investors. And especially once we see clusters of groups of multiple consecutive days of losses on positions, like we could see here, we almost always see a pretty positive bounce in the Bitcoin price action, especially during a bull cycle. So I think something like this is best utilized alongside potentially another metric such as the golden ratio multiplier or the pi cycle top indicator to really clarify if we are in a bull cycle or in a bear cycle, or any moving average really. If I just draw on a very rough line which may indicate what a moving average may look like, then you can see something like this. And once we're actually above this moving average, like we can see here, then we're in a bull cycle. And once we see consecutive days of losses during a bull cycle, as we said, it's probably a very good place to load up on cheap discounted BTC, because like we said, anyone selling at a loss during these conditions probably is a little bit irrational, not the greatest investor. And on the contrary, the same can be maybe true during a bear cycle. If we can take this very rough moving average that I draw to define bull and bear cycles, we can see that once we're actually seeing a majority selling in the market, we can actually look to periods where we have sustained periods of profit taking. These potentially indicate people that maybe bought on a quick dip or bought months ago and are just looking for any opportunity to exit the market. And these may be another great opportunity to take partial profits on any position you may have left over after the bull cycle has concluded. And if I just remove everything here, as well as being able to load up cheap BTC during a bull cycle, it allows us to maybe look for extreme events that maybe highlight areas where maybe a Bitcoin bull cycle peak has occurred or maybe a Bitcoin bear cycle bottom. We can see down here as Bitcoin bottomed out, the SOPR indicated a huge amount of losses on pretty much everyone's Bitcoin positions, and people selling during this capitulation event really were selling at the absolute bottom of the Bitcoin market. But that gives a great opportunity to us more in tune, strategic, unbiased, less emotional investors, if I like to say so myself, to maybe load up a bit more on cheap BTC. We saw a very similar situation here during the COVID 2020 dump. And of course, during these periods of time, the emotional distraught you may be feeling, that absolute dread as Bitcoin plummets in price, you almost need to act as a contrarian against your own inner emotions and biases, definitely against the majority of market participants, to act as the contrarian, to actually accumulate when others are selling. When others are selling, it usually indicates Bitcoin is very much at a discount. And we can see, again, similarly, as Bitcoin is having a huge upsurge in price action and a lot of people are taking profits on their position, this may indicate that at least a short-term pullback is necessary, like we could see most recently at our new all-time high at about $73,000, $74,000. This metric actually spiked incredibly high, indicating that a lot of people maybe thought that we were a little bit overheated, at least in the short term, and maybe due a little bit of cool off. This doesn't necessarily indicate an exact bull cycle peak, because we could see, for example, in the 2020-2021 cycle that we had the highest peak on this ratio and then consecutive lower peaks as we actually set all-time highs. One thing to notice is this most recent massive spike we've had to the upside is probably a little bit of an anomaly on this metric. This was almost certainly caused by the Mt. Gox refund claims, as Mt. Gox coins were being moved from one wallet to another, about 140,000, as they were repaying creditors. So that is maybe not the most truest representation of this metric, but I think this is very well utilized along something else like the Bitcoin funding rate, which allows us to see almost the similar kind of level of taking profit, capitulation, greed, fear in the market, but based on the derivatives market. So whereas the spent output profit ratio is pretty much based on spot markets tracking real BTC moving from wallet to wallet, the Bitcoin funding rates is tracking a number of different Bitcoin exchanges to see the level of fear or greed, like we said, during a bull or bear cycle, but actually based on the derivatives market. So we can see here, my favorite way to use this chart is the coin denominated Bitcoin funding rates. And again, very clearly, we can see the disparity between investor emotion at a moment in time and what happens next. As everyone's shorting the market, we get these huge negative spikes in the funding rates, indicating people are paying a massive premium to short Bitcoin, betting on lower prices. Almost every single time, it's been the key reversal point during a Bitcoin cycle. And even now, in this most recent dip we've had, we can see as Bitcoin dipped to about $55,000 and we had multiple consecutive days of fairly negative Bitcoin funding rates. That was the exact recent low we set in the market before we rebounded 10, 20% plus from that low. And again, if we see incredibly high sustained funding rates, it maybe is a time to reduce your exposure to the market, at least consider some profit taking, and definitely don't be scaling into positions or longing with excess leverage and excess size when we see everyone else betting that this rally is going to continue indefinitely. Also, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to ensure you're receiving all of our content as soon as it's released. And make sure to check out all the resources we've discussed today, as well as the many more that are all available on bitcoinmagazinepro.com, your number one source for Bitcoin analysis. So just to summarize, the Bitcoin spend output profit ratio, or SOPR, allows us to see the real-time profit taking of all BTC in USD terms. Green days indicate coins moved for a profit, and red days indicate coins moved at a loss. So it really allows us to see the level of capitulation potentially when investors who potentially bought exceedingly high prices of BTC and maybe getting a little bit scared and frustrated and selling at a loss, when really during a bull cycle, these are the times where we really should be scooping up discounted BTC, because these opportunities are pretty rare, and the risk reward you actually experience at these levels mean that accumulating at these points in time is definitely should be your play, rather than looking to offload more BTC. And especially when we see multiple consecutive red days during a bull cycle like we've seen recently, these have historically acted as a significant risk reward, like we said, turning point in the market and a buy the dip opportunity as investors begin to capitulate and sell their Bitcoin for a loss. And we should also monitor this metric and potentially similar ones such as the Bitcoin funding rates to ensure we're not holding onto coins at a majority of large holders begin to offload their positions for a substantial profit, like we could see during a Bitcoin bull cycle in the previous cycle, and of course on the funding rates when the derivative markets are maybe getting a little bit overheated, when everyone's making money, when it seems too easy, when you're getting Bitcoin tips from old friends you haven't talked to in a few years potentially. At that point in time, that level of greed we see in the market, probably not a great idea to continue scaling in, and it's probably worth considering scaling out. If you liked this video, then please visit bitcoinmagazinepro.com, where our analytics help you to cut through the noise to make informed, data-driven decisions about Bitcoin. With over 150 live charts, personalized indicator alerts, in-depth crypto industry reports, API access, and more, all for a fraction of the standard industry price. And to celebrate the launch of Bitcoin Magazine Pro, we're currently offering a free trial for all new site subscribers. So don't miss out on this limited time opportunity to try out all of our advanced features free of charge. And let me know what your thoughts are on using metrics such as the spend output profit ratio and funding rates to try and accumulate discounted BTC during a bull cycle. And let me know what your strategy is for maybe buying on dips and potentially selling on rips. Whatever your thoughts are, let me know both in the comments below and on social media. I look forward to reading and replying to all of them. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.